Good morning and welcome to the RightScale webinar Cloud Computing Basics. Before we get started, we're going to ask you a couple of questions. We use the answers to these questions to help tailor our presentation, as well as we use this time to do a little bit of market research. So the first question I believe is up. Are you using the cloud today? So we'll wait just a few minutes and let people have a chance to give answers. We usually wait until we see enough so that everything gets pretty steady state. Okay, good. So we say we've got a number of people who aren't on the cloud, but I assume because you're here, you're interested in moving to the cloud. A lot of people beginning to explore, and not a lot of people with a tremendous amount of experience. So why don't we move on to the next question. So we're wondering, if you're here, why you're considering using cloud computing. Is it to save costs? Is it to increase IT agility? Is it to increase your business's agility? Or is it to access additional computing resources? Okay, so it looks like we've got an even horse race here. People spread across, and probably people answering duplicate with duplicate reasons. Now the next two questions are actually the same question with different answers, so we hope that you will select all of the answers that apply to the question, what are you looking for in a cloud management platform? So you can check as many as you want. Are you trying to reduce complexity? Should a cloud management platform give you a fast on-ramp? Configuration management, automation of your infrastructure, or manage systems and not just individual servers. Okay, so a lot of people are looking to reduce the complexity, and there's surely a fair amount of complexity using the APIs with some of the cloud providers, and managing whole systems, so really managing a total architecture to deploy an application instead of individual servers. So let's try for the next set. The same question, but just some different answers. Are you looking for it to deliver user management or cost management? Are you looking for the ability to implement a unique architecture, making sure that you can design an architecture that meets the requirements of the applications you're moving to the cloud? You want the ability to choose your own software stack or database, and or ability to choose your own cloud infrastructure or infrastructures. You may have public or private clouds, want to go across multiple cloud providers. Okay, so let's focus on user management, a lot on cost management, and a lot on the ability to choose your own cloud provider. So we thank you for your patience in answering these questions. Let's get started. I have here with me Michael Crandell. He's one of the founders and our CEO, as well as Yuri Budnick. Yuri travels the world talking about RightScale and talking about the cloud, helping people to understand the advantages of the cloud and the advantages of RightScale. We also have online and ready to answer your questions John Newton and Tina Daly. And so these two will answer questions as the presentation is going. If you look at the bottom of the GoToWebinar control panel, there's a tab that says Question Panel. Go ahead anytime through this presentation, key in your questions, and Tina and John will be answering those questions. We then consolidate the ones that are more generally applicable and have a live Q&A at the end of the webinar. So here's our agenda. After a very brief introduction to who we are, Michael's going to talk about what is cloud computing. I think during that talk you're going to see a very quick demonstration of how easy it is to get on the cloud and start launching servers. And then we're going to focus on who's using the cloud, what are they using the cloud for, and then Yuri is going to give us a full-fledged demo of launching an entire architecture on the cloud, looking at how you do that and what are the tools to manage that deployment. So with that, Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Betsy. Welcome, everyone, again. doing these cloud basics webinars is really, they're my favorite, and it's because it's a very, very exciting time in cloud computing. I believe we're still at the very earliest days of this movement, and so what we try to do in a webinar on cloud basics is a little bit of something for everyone. For those of you who are maybe brand new to cloud computing, just looking for an overview and an understanding of it, we have some material on that. For those who are already running a project or maybe very seriously considering whether the cloud is appropriate for the kind of project that you'd like to run, we have a lot of material on that. And so we're addressing a little bit of everything from theory about cloud computing to who's using it today and real case use cases. And then on, we're going to dive into some live demo work with Yuri leading us through a quick overview of what it actually looks like to run servers and so on in the cloud for specific applications using the RightScale interface. So welcome. This is going to be exciting, and as mentioned, please do fire away with questions at any time, and we'll work them into the program. Just a word to start with about RightScale itself. RightScale is in the business of cloud management. That means that we are a platform that lives on top of low-level cloud infrastructure providers, and it's designed to be a platform that really is soup to nuts. It's the world that you live in when you want to manage your cloud resources, all the way from development and test through to staging, production, and the full life cycle of maintaining IT resources in the cloud. We've grown to more than 20,000 users, counting the free version of RightScale, the free edition. We've launched more than 1.2 million servers to date. We're a little over 3 years old. We've powered a lot of the biggest scaling events that have happened in the cloud. These are our kind of poster child stories of scaling from 50 to over 3,500 servers in a few days. A single company running 8,000, 10,000, 12,000 servers in a steady state. Huge scaling in terms of unique users per day. And for that reason, and you'll see as we go into the presentation, that we're bold enough, I'd say, to take the moniker of no hype. We really try to focus on real use cases and what businesses are doing in production cases in the cloud today. So to move on from there, let's start out with what is cloud computing. This is pretty commonly accepted today, but just a quick review, refresher. Cloud computing really is around the notion of being able to access compute resources from a virtually infinite pool and provisioned on demand. That means that through a programmatic API or programming interface, a call can be made from one program to launch compute and access compute resources. Almost all clouds are on a pay-per-use basis. Most of them, the most common being paid by the hour. So if you use a server, it's paid by the hour. If you use a gigabyte of storage, it's paid by the month. And that these resources are available and accessed over the internet. So in the most common case, one is launching resources that one does not manage, see, or feel, or touch directly. And that's where the phrase "in the cloud" comes from. It's from the original network diagrams that showed communications going through the internet where you didn't know exactly what the routing was and where it was going, so people drew clouds. This has evolved, though, over the last year and a half or so into people also building private clouds within their own enterprise data centers. And so cloud computing has come to broaden and encompass that also. So what are the key benefits? What's driving this whole movement? Well, the biggest and the one we hear most commonly from customers is around business agility. Second one is cost reduction. And the third is around the level of reliability and flexibility made available by cloud providers, and we'll talk more about that, but that has to do with the notion that you can create redundant resources in different regions of geographical regions, so that if something should happen in one of them, a failure should occur, that you can really achieve levels of redundancy and resiliency unavailable at the kinds of cost levels that we are seeing today wasn't available before, and flexibility in locating services close to where your users are on a global basis. But before we go any further, I'd like to give a little very simple, quick teaser demo here, Yuri, if you would, around the business agility, and show us just in the very simplest case, how easy is it to launch a server in the cloud?
Thank you, Michael. This is Yuri speaking now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move my web browser here into the screen so that everybody can do it. And I happen to be logged into a RightScale account that I use for demos. So RightScale, in fact, is software as a service that you can access to the web browser. And what I've done here is to avoid a few tedious steps and not have everybody watching me configure some things. I've already logged in to a particular deployment, meaning a container for a server that I'm using for this demo called Cloud Basics Webinar. And in this deployment, I have a server template for a blog. So what I'm going to show you is how quick and easy and simple really it is to launch a blog, and how nevertheless I have the ability to configure and tweak some things as necessary. And this is useful because what I have here, if you think of it in the context of your company, is a pre-approved configuration for a blog. So instead of me having to go call somebody in IT and tell them I need a blog, and I'm waiting for them to requisition the equipment and all the kind of business delays that happen, what I can do here, and I will show you right now, I'm moving my mouse over to the right side where there's a little blue button that says Launch. If I click on it, it brings me to a screen that allows me to make some configuration changes if I want to before this particular WordPress server launches. And just to show you that I can make changes, I'm going to change the name of the blog itself to, I'm going to call it Cloud Basics Demo. And now I'm going to click Launch. And what's happening now is that RightScale really is a control layer here for the servers deployed in the cloud, and we're making an API call to the cloud provider and saying, stand up a server, and once that does, we're actually going to configure and install a blog in there as per the specific configuration that we did. Now, this is actually very fast, but it does take 3 minutes or so, and we don't want to obviously have everybody waiting that whole time. So you can see that the state is pending. And what I'm going to do now while that takes place is give the presentation back to Michael so we can go on and return to this later. And I think I need to minimize this and move it out of the way for you.
Great. Thanks, Yuri. One question before we go on. If you were to compare that with how in a traditional IT provisioning setting, how much time that would have taken, what are we looking at?
Well, you're looking at 5 minutes versus days or longer, sometimes weeks. I know some of us that have worked at very large companies know what it's like to get something that is seemingly very simple that can be complicated. And the other interesting thing to point out, Michael, is that it's about the same amount of work to launch a single server as it is to launch dozens or hundreds. And it's very useful because it's a repeatable process where you can encode your company's best practices. This is the kind of configuration that we have approved for a server, and now the IT department doesn't need to worry about people doing all sorts of things that are not approved. They can make it available for them to launch as when they see it necessary.
Right, right. You know, I heard an interesting statistic for those of you who are trying to promote or champion this idea of using cloud computing within your companies. One of our customers is Eli Lilly, and one of the pioneers there is a fellow named Dave Powers, who came up with a great marketing way of expressing this within his company, which was the provisioning time for them went on average down from 35,000 minutes to 30 minutes. And simply what he did was multiplied whatever that is, 5 or 6 weeks, which was the average provisioning time, into minutes. But it's enormous, enormous difference, particularly in their business, where time to market for drugs and the speed of getting research done and expiration of patents is critical. All right, so we'll return and we'll see that server running in later in the presentation. But moving on now, what we can see that this kind of capability in the cloud solves is a traditional problem that has really plagued IT for many years around what it means to meet a fluctuating demand from your users, whether those users are internal or external. So again, whether you're provisioning your own hardware or getting it from a managed hosting provider where there are long-term contracts, etc. What we see here, the red line, represents user demand. The blue line represents the attempt to provision resources, and as you can see, it's going in stair steps because at some point you decide to allocate more hardware, you buy the hardware, or you sign a long-term lease on it. And the green represents the up and down arrow there. It's the gap between, in that particular point in time, the company had over-provisioned the hardware, so the demand was about half of what the hardware allocation was. So you could have been using that time and money for something else at that point. But more importantly, later on to the right where you see the pink shaded area, the provisioning of the hardware did not keep up with the demand. And since these provisioning exercises are usually not 5 minutes in the traditional sense, they're more like weeks, you can really get caught behind the 8 ball and caught behind the curve there. And you lose customers, whether that's customers on a public-facing website, or you lose the trust and the business agility and speed to market that you need internally if you're not able to meet the demand. So ideally what is important and what's delivered by the cloud is this kind of agility represented by a yellow line where automated provisioning and provisioning on demand can much more closely meet the needs of your users. And so that results in agile infrastructure, agile deployment where you get the resources when they're needed. It also results in cost savings. Let's step back for a second and tease out a little bit what we mean or what's meant in the general world by cloud computing today. It's really generally accepted that it refers to 3 different levels of computing. One is called software as a service, or software in the cloud. Second is called platform as a service. And the third and probably most recent innovation is infrastructure as a service. And a way to think about this, software as a service examples are things like Gmail, Salesforce.com, many other examples. If you're accessing the application through a web browser, and that's your point of interface, that's software as a service. Platform as a service really has to do with providing an execution environment for code. So quite typically you're working in a single language, Ruby on Rails or Java or Python, and the platform as a service provider gives you a way to plug that code in, and they take care of everything else behind the scenes, how many servers, how much disk space, what kind of network bandwidth is required. That's the idea of platform as a service. So if all that you're concerned with is code, typically in a single language, that might be an appropriate environment for you. The latest and biggest innovation is around infrastructure as a service. And that's the area in the red circle, the red rounded rectangle at the bottom. These are cloud providers like Amazon, EC2, Rackspace Cloud, many others that are public clouds, as well as private cloud infrastructure software, such as Eucalyptus Systems, Cloud.com, VMware's vCloud, etc. And this is where RightScale lives. Many, many applications and systems require more flexibility, all the way from choosing which operating system you're running on, through to data models, database choices, through to which programming language and environment you want to use, and then which application you'd like to run. And transparency and openness is required, hence the dotted lines. RightScale is a platform that really allows ultimate flexibility and control there. So those are the different levels of cloud. And going back to the benefits both across agility, cost reduction, flexibility, and resiliency, what this has created is an environment of explosive growth. And I wanted to share 2 graphs just so people have a sense of how fast this movement is going. This first one here shows servers launched as tracked by RightScale over the years, and you can see quite a nice curve occurring there in terms of servers launched. But if we fast forward a little bit and look not just at a launched server, but at dollars spent on low-level cloud infrastructure that represents, what we see is that the investment in terms of dollars is even bigger. And the reason for that is that when you launch a server, you don't know how long it might run when you're monitoring that. might run for an hour, it might run for a year. But our customers that we're powering are running servers for longer periods of time, and they're running larger servers that cost more. And if you wrap all that together, it's really driving more and more spend and investment in the cloud and resulting savings across business agility, cost reduction, etc. So who's using the cloud? Well, this graph is a graph of paying RightScale customers. And you can see that very quickly, in a short period of time, we expanded worldwide. And that's, of course, one of the benefits of cloud, as you saw in Yuri's quick demo and we'll return to. Customers are able to access and manage all of their cloud resources through a web browser. So whether you're in Africa, South America, Australia, Hawaii, Europe, US, Asia, etc., you can access through a web browser cloud resources that may also run in any of those locations. So it's a very flexible, powerful model, and the cloud interface through RightScale becomes, if you will, a virtual portal into your infrastructure that might be running anywhere. So it's spread quickly in a global sense. And it's equally spread across company sizes, ranging from startups through to enterprise customers. And the fastest growing segment for us is enterprise, just because the adoption tends to occur at a more moderate pace there. But we're really powering all kinds of different applications, from Web 2.0 websites to internal enterprise apps. Our customer A to Z equivalent is really, we throw up AstraZeneca, which is a biopharma company, through to Zynga, which is a social game on Facebook, and across many different verticals in the market, and many different use cases, which I've listed here, ranging from websites, grid or batch applications, test and development is very popular, disaster recovery, and even application delivery. Let me touch on a few examples of actual customer cases. So one of them is Sony Music. Some of you might recognize the guy playing the guitar here. That's a young Bob Dylan. And Sony powers a number of websites for performers and musicians, and Bob is one of them. And what they do is they actually use RightScale to power those websites, because it's not clear which sites are going to gather which traffic based on new releases, based on news events that happen in a performer or a celebrity's life. And so they find the cloud a very flexible way to power both the fan sites for artists as well as the e-commerce sites where they sell the artist's music and sometimes other package deals along with the music. So that's one example. That's a very public-facing kind of Web 2.0 example of using cloud. Here's another different example. This is also entertainment-oriented. It's a company called Sling Media. They make a device called the Sling Box that you can buy, and it allows you to really consume your media content, particularly TV shows, etc., that you receive at home. You can consume it anywhere. And you can consume it everywhere, from a big screen to a mobile phone to a web browser in a hotel room. And the problem that they sought to solve using cloud computing was batch processing. So they get content from many different content partners who publish TV episodes, for example, and they need to transcode or reformat that content for different resolution, color depth devices, and have it ready to play when one of their customers wants to access it. And so what they use for that is a framework RightScale's built called a grid, which allows firing up a whole bunch of server resources based on how many transcoding jobs need to be done at a particular time, and then turns those resources off when they're not needed. So that's another very different kind of batch processing example for the cloud. Here's another interesting one. It's a company that powers different publisher content for mobile devices. It's our customer StarCut. And here's an example of content that they power having to do with, I believe, stock quotes. And what you see there is an actual RightScale graph showing the traffic through mobile devices to this stock quote site. And it forms a very repetitious pattern there. You can see that people check their quotes in the morning. It tails off a little bit at lunch, peaks again at the close of the market, and kind of trails away and goes to nothing in the evening and on the weekend. So this is a very predictable load pattern, and this company uses RightScale to help automate the launching of servers right before that morning scale, and then turning them down again in the evenings and on the weekends. It means that their site is high performance, very reliable, quick to respond for customers, and not running a lot of resources when it doesn't need to be during the week. Here's another set of examples. This is around Facebook games. And RightScale actually powers the top 10 Facebook apps outside of Facebook itself. So if you look at those arrows, they're pointing to all the non-Facebook apps as measured by a site called developeranalytics.com. This was as of April, and this does change on a daily basis, but this shows the tremendous scale that's achievable on the cloud. I think at one point, you see Farmville there with 82 million monthly users, 27 million daily active users, and if you add all that up, it's probably around 50 million daily active users powered by our platform. At one point, the peak traffic for all of these Facebook apps together powered by RightScale reached about 2% of global total internet traffic. So it really answers the question, is this platform, is the cloud capable of scaling to meet my needs? Well, if it can handle this, certainly it can probably handle yours. One final example here, I mentioned earlier Eli Lilly. They're using cloud computing and RightScale for enterprise usage. They have a number of different applications ranging from grids for drug research, doing things like image analysis and statistical analysis, through to the powering of collaboration apps. For example, shared wikis that their globally spread research teams share in different regions of the world. And they wanted to push the capability to launch information resources to the business users in their organization. And to do that, they built something on top of RightScale called self-service infrastructure. You see it there in the quote. Kind of a vending machine approach where their business users can go to a simplified version of the RightScale interface and launch a wiki or launch a small grid to do image analysis if they're a researcher in the organization. And this is, again, where they get access to these resources in less than half an hour versus 5 weeks. So this kind of flexibility and agility is really unprecedented in the world of IT. It's one of the reasons that cloud computing is such a popular and really disruptive movement, and one of the reasons that it's catching on so fast. But now let's shift gears. That's kind of some background information about defining the cloud, who's using it, what the use cases are. Let's actually shift gears and dive in now, if we can, Yuri, and go into a little more depth of what's possible using RightScale and how that can all be run really by everyone from IT to a business user.
Sure thing, Michael. So I'll actually, in the demonstration, show some of the benefits that you've been describing during the presentation itself. So when I was last doing the demo a moment ago, I think I showed it even to an extreme degree of simplicity, how with a few clicks I launched a web server, and perhaps some people thought that nothing actually happened. So I wanted to come back to that and show you the screen where I left it at. This said pending before. This is a blog that has now been running for almost 17 minutes. It was literally quite that easy. And let me actually show you the blog itself. If I click on the name of my server, it takes me to an information page for that server, and then I'm going to click to the public-facing web page for that machine. I now see the configuration page for the server, and when I say show me the application that's running here, as you see me clicking through, you see the blog that I set up. That's why I added the word demo there in front of everybody so you see it. So it took, I don't know what that was, 5 clicks and 3 minutes flat to be running a demo. And think of what Michael was describing a moment ago at self-service architecture. It's an approved configuration for a company to be able to let the employees launch blogs, and they can actually do it themselves without having to pull a lot of other people from the company. So
let me just stop you for a second there.
Sure.
That is amazing.
You know what? We forget that because we do this so much, Michael. You're right.
Yeah.
For those of you out there working on this stuff, I know that there's been people that have had quite a bit of difficulty setting up something as simple as this. So going back and drawing from Michael's presentation, we're really talking here about infrastructure as a service when I talk about cloud. Think of the chart he was showing. And RightScale is a software that you use to deploy, control, automate, to make it easier for you to build and maintain the environments that you have on the cloud. And we're looking at here at my web browser that I'm logged in, and we have a bird's eye view. See, we call this screen the dashboard. And we have a bird's eye view of what we call deployments. Think of a deployment as a container for multiple servers so you can manage at the system level. It's a lot more useful than having a long alphabetical list of all your servers. Less confusing this way when you can organize and aggregate the servers that belong to the same application. And notice in the survey there was a question about visibility and controlling costs. Notice here how I can even see how much things cost me. So this particular deployment is almost 60 cents an hour or $14 a day. And last month it cost me $280. So now I can break up different groups of servers in my company by business unit or functional group or project and actually control and have visibility into cost that way. And that's what you see here with the colored dots, what's running and what isn't. A nice bird's eye view of what's happening in your cloud servers. I'm going to click on one of the deployments now to show you a little bit more information there. And now this is the details of what's happening inside of that particular deployment. And you can see the name up here, the auto-scaling demo website. And the same cost information is here again so you can keep tabs on it, control it. Now, let me describe a little bit better what's happening here by showing you a logical diagram of these servers. And that's what you see in this diagram right here. It's actually rather simple. It's two front-end servers and a master-slave database. The idea is to show something that's not too complex, but nevertheless fairly resilient. Either one of these servers can go down, and because we're doing DNS round robin, you're still running. If my database fails, I have replication and a slave, so I can still have my site up and going. That's what we have here. Front ends A and B, as you just saw, and the database master and slave. Notice that I can even see what cloud they're running in. All of these happen to be on Amazon Web Services or EC2, the Elastic Compute Cloud, the East region. I can see that they've been running since this morning, for example. Now,
let me just ask a question. There's one in the middle there, that HTTP perf. What is that thing?
We're using this to create synthetic traffic and fire it to these two other front-end servers. Otherwise, it would just sit idle the whole time.
I see.
And what I'm going to show in a moment is what happens when you overload them with traffic, which is coming from this server, pretending to be generating a lot of virtual users, let's say. So one of the very interesting capabilities from the cloud is the fact that you can very easily launch servers. I showed a moment ago the blog. Now, let me describe what it would have been like to build this entire deployment myself from scratch. I needed to save time in the demonstration, but here under my Manage and Deployments menu, I just create a new deployment, gives me an empty container. I give it a name, in this case, Auto-Scaling Demo Website, and then I add servers one by one. Instead of adding these 5 servers, let me just add one right now so you see what that's like. I have the section here at the bottom where I can add a server, and the drop-down menu actually lets me select where I want that server running.
So you can actually have a cluster of servers that go in different clouds or different regions?
Different continents even. If you look at this list, I have Amazon Web Services Asia Pacific, that happens to be in Singapore, Amazon EU, that's actually in Ireland for Europe, and then data centers in the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States. There's Rackspace Cloud, and if you have your own private cloud running in your corporate data center, that could be listed in here as well. So you actually you can choose geographically where you want a server running, and you click Add Server. This brings a screen that actually lets you pick the specific server that you want. And what I'm going to do here is look down my list of pre-configured servers. We talked about that self-service capability. And I'm just going to add one more front end to this particular environment. In the interest of time, I'm going to leave all the other settings as default, but I'm going to call this one front and C to match the rest of the naming, and I click on add. Again, remember, this could have been, and you see the, I apologize, I have a little typo here in the name, but this
that just shows this is a real demo.
Correct. This could have very well been another server running in Europe or a brand new environment that me sitting in California, I just deployed in Singapore that quickly. Now, I'm going to move on and explain a little bit more about how the automation that RightScale provides can become very interesting in terms of making the work easier. I just clicked on one of the servers, and then I clicked on the monitoring tab for that particular server to show you how you have visibility into everything that's happening there. What we're seeing now here is for this particular server, for one of the front ends that I showed in this diagram, one of these guys, all the different things that we can monitor that you see as categories here in these yellow rectangles across the top. And if I click on any one of them, then I can see the metrics or the items that we monitor for that category. So, for example, if I click on the CPU, I have my CPU overview graph that I can see here. And notice there's a recurring pattern here. The green is the idle. You can see that name here. Let me point out something from my logical diagram that I showed you before. Again, this is the environment we're looking at in the RightScale Management Console. So let me present a hypothetical situation. Actually, it's in fact something that's happening. It's not hypothetical. What happens if these two servers receive so much traffic that they can no longer handle the load? Well, we have the ability to do this via automation. We can start provisioning more servers based on a trigger point that you define. If the servers are no longer able to cope with the load, we can auto-provision more servers and even more importantly, auto-configure them, meaning they will be fully operational from the get-go as they come online. And that's why, oops, I meant to click on this tab. That's why you see this particular pattern here. Oops, let me actually make it a little simpler by clicking on now. You have the green is the idle value, and you see here blue is the user, and when it starts taking up too much of the CPU load, and the green being the idle is going down, as you see here, all of a sudden we auto-provision more servers, and that's where you see the capacity grow again, this rectangle that you see here. It's actually the same pattern in a different scale that you see here. The line here represents the same as the blue here, except on a whole day scale. So you see it go up, go up, go up, it hits a trigger point, it's taking too much of the CPU load, we ought to provision more servers, and once again, there's more capacity. Now, there was a comment earlier about more visibility into financial controls. Remember, as Michael mentioned, that often people pay for their servers by the hour. So this is rather efficient because how many companies need the same number of servers running at 2 in the morning as they do during the business day? So that means you provision servers based on load and on demand, and you decommission them when they're no longer necessary, therefore seeing some financial benefits there.
So this is a process that in the past would have had to be managed by human beings.
Not only that, Michael, there were business decisions that had to be made about buying a lot of equipment just in case you needed it.
Right.
So now what happens is instead of architecting for a peak load and essentially buying insurance in the form of a lot of equipment that's its idle, you design something so they can scale based on demand, but there's no extra cost in doing that. You only pay for what you actually use.
Yep. So it's cheaper and there's no guesswork.
Correct. Now I'm going to talk about another really interesting thing that you can do here that it's probably one of the most popular uses of the cloud and definitely for RightScale is this idea of, let me paint another hypothetical picture actually. Let's say this is your production environment, and as you can see, all these servers are running right now, and you have a team of programmers that have been working on the new version of your website. New database schema, new code for your web servers, and obviously everybody needs to test those things before they go into production. And creating a staging environment for testing or for QA can be quite a bit of work. Anybody that's ever worked in that kind of job knows. Requisitioning the hardware, waiting for purchase orders to be approved, and receiving equipment, and that's if you're not fighting over budget battles. And once you overcome all that, in order to really create a true test, your staging should be identical in every way to your production environment. And that's quite difficult to achieve, not counting how long it takes to really create a true test. Let me compare and contrast and show you how dramatically different that is in the cloud. Remember, we have all these servers running and we know all their configurations because you're managing them through RightScale. So I have this button here up above that says clone. And this is going to seem almost too good to be true, actually, but as I click on clone here, it takes 5 to 10 seconds or about something like that, and I'm going to have a complete identical environment to the production one that you were just looking at. And notice I didn't have to do it. I did not have to do it at 2 in the morning to not impact the visitors to my website. Now what I do here is I rename this -QA. So again, I'm leveraging that idea of deployments that I create for different purposes. And let's say my QA team happens to be in India or in a different country or a different company. I can give the team access to this and only this, so that I don't have to worry about them somehow interfering with my production environment and impacting my business. So not only did I make the staging environment very quickly, I can control who sees it, and because these servers are not running yet, all I did is copy their configurations. There's no cost.
Right. You know, I just have to comment on this because the interesting point is I think it's well known that I think I read a statistic, well over half of software bugs are the root cause of that is not enough insufficient testing, right? And I think what we find is not only what Yuri just showed would make the process easier and faster, but what normally happens is it doesn't happen at all. Because companies, when I talk with dev teams, they're frustrated because they cannot get the hardware to do the testing that they need to do, so they just do without.
Sure.
So this really enables a whole level of process that wasn't even present before.
Sure.
And folks, again, who have to do this kind of testing, it pops up all the time from the developers want a new version of the programming language or a library they're using, to load testing, to all kinds of varieties and all the way up through production that are now enabled that weren't before.
Or for example, Michael, sometimes they have to compromise because they have 3 different tests they want to run, and each protocol takes maybe 8 hours, and they can't afford to wait that long. You saw how quickly we create an environment, and think of this as temporary, as transient. So I could have done it 3 times and had 3 different QA teams running 3 different types of regression tests or analysis or so forth. And then when we're done, terminate those environments. I'm no longer paying for them.
Right. I know we do this extensively internally within RightScale on our own development, and it's really changed the pace and agility that we work with.
Yeah, it's hard to overstate sometimes how much the people that do the QA work end up taking advantage of the new capabilities. And I think the phrase that was used early on was agility. This is what we were seeking to show you here, really how it improves the way that you can achieve your business goals.
You know, there was a quick question that came in before you finish up. If I want to test my existing website on the cloud, what do I do?
It's actually rather straightforward. This is not very costly to try out. So it's very simple to set up an account with one of the cloud providers, to set up a free developer account with RightScale to test it. We're always happy to talk to people that are trying to understand better how they might be able to take advantage of it. I know at the end of the presentation we'll share the contact info. So my advice is you don't have to do a tremendous amount of in-depth study. You can actually roll up your sleeves and try a little something, and that will teach you how that may be able to work for you.
Right, right. So we'll get back to that later, but...
I think I was going to transition it back to you.
Oh, good.
Michael.
So let's drag that out of the way.
Let me do this, and you're back.
And move ahead. So, you know, this slide really shows some of the key reasons that have been driving folks to consider a management platform. We did that set of questions at the beginning in the poll around these same questions. But you can tell that there's an enormous amount of complexity that has been reduced and simplified. The automation that's provided is very important for customers. Just simply having a fast on-ramp. Give me the tools and componentry I need to really focus on my application and my needs versus all the what's often called undifferentiated heavy lifting of allocating servers and putting common components on. And let me do it with a partner who's done this before. And that's where deployment expertise comes in, as well as portability. You saw Yuri pulling down that combo box with all the choices of different cloud regions, cloud providers that you can access. Very important, particularly in larger organizations that may even have corporate policies of getting more than one provider for a service. So for all these reasons, we see tremendous uptake and pressure behind adoption of cloud. And at the end of the day, the vision that we're trying to communicate here is around RightScale providing a unified management environment of multiple cloud platforms, both public and private, all from within a single interface, a single pane of glass, if you will, an environment that we say this is the environment you live in to run your IT, all the way from, again, from development through the full life cycle, where you can track costs, where you can control user privileges and access, and where you can audit what's happened. And huge choice, really unprecedented in the business, of choice of geolocation and the costs involved. What we didn't point out when you were choosing among all those regions is it was still 8.5, 10 cents an hour, maybe cheaper, a few cents more. It's amazing what you can get at for very, very little cost today in the cloud. So that's the ultimate vision, and really what it boils down to is providing a platform for a new way of doing IT that gives you more agility, that saves money, that gives you better performance at the end of the day, and that it allows new levels of resiliency, meaning failover handling, failure remediation, and so on, as well as automation, allowing your IT staff to really move up to a higher level of what they're focusing on in delivering the benefits of IT to the business. So with that, I think we're getting quite a few questions over the line. And Yuri, I'll let you look at some of these and pick one you like, but I'll start out with one here. The first question is, how much does it cost to use this version of RightScale, and what do customers pay for? Well, we have a variety of editions listed on our website, and in a slide in a moment we'll show you how to contact us and engage with a salesperson. But in simple terms, there are different editions of RightScale. You sign up for RightScale. There's a whole tiered pricing scheme ranging from quite inexpensive per month up through full enterprise versions. It involves a monthly subscription fee to the RightScale dashboard, as well as a setup fee that varies according to the edition that you're licensing and a few other factors. And it includes a bucket of server hours managed per month, kind of like a cell phone plan, and then excess usage is billed on an hourly basis. So it's quite inexpensive to get involved. You can get monthly plans. You can also use our free edition if you want to get your feet wet without incurring any cost. So there are a number of options there, and we'll turn to that in a minute. Have you got a question here?
Yeah, I'll take the next question here, Michael, and let me read the question here. What is the difference between private and public clouds in terms of application and cost? This is something that actually comes up quite a bit. There's a few companies that have invested in their own data center. They see this movement towards cloud. They see the benefits are actually quite easy to recognize, but they have this, perhaps you can describe it as a sunk cost already in physical plant, and they're trying to think of what's their strategy for that. Let me describe the different applications and uses that we see. The cloud has been rather successful for companies that are launching brand new projects where they don't have a legacy app that they're moving necessarily to the cloud, especially when it's something that's public facing, a website where the ultimate demand is difficult to predict before you launch. Those are all areas where the public cloud excels because you're not committing budget to unknowns. You're just designing for what you need, and then if it's very successful, it'll grow as necessary. The places where private cloud becomes really interesting is when you have some rather sensitive data, perhaps, that you're not quite ready to move into the cloud until you feel you understand it better, or some other more proprietary things that you'd rather keep behind your firewall for now. There's actually a few options there that lets you still take some of the advantages of cloud computing without having to make rather dramatic architectural decisions just yet. So there's a lot of options to explore, really. That's actually the short answer. Lots and lots of options to explore. And like I said on a previous question, we're happy to talk to different people to try to help them understand their options and how to work with the different things that might be available for them.
Right. I've got two questions here I'm going to handle in pretty rapid order. The first one is, what kind of ROI or return on investment has been realized from the scaling flexibility provided by the stock quote provider example, the mobile device publishing platform that I mentioned earlier? So, I don't have specifics on that ROI, but I am going to go to this slide where we've referenced on the bottom line there a white paper that we published on total cost of ownership and ROI. And there are a number of different examples in there that I think are representative of the kind of ROI realized by the stock quote provider as well as many other customers. So would recommend that you check that out. The second question, actually two questions, hover around Windows support. The first is, can RightScale deploy and monitor a Windows-based environment? The answer is yes. That's now released GA, general availability release. And feel free to contact us for any specifics about versions of Windows Server, but I believe we have in GA Windows Server 2003, and 2008 is either close to that or can be tested on a beta basis. Related question was, if I have a website in .NET, what do I need to run in a cloud environment? We are able to support that. Please contact us and we can help you. And the person also asked, do I need to consider cloud at design time, or can I take it to the cloud later? Well, there's a mixed answer there. It really depends on what you're trying to do. If you're really trying to achieve massive scalability, there are design and architecture considerations you should take into account. But that's something that we actually help consult with. And here where we're talking about if you have a project and you'd like to talk with us about whether it's appropriate for the cloud, what to take into account, just shoot us an email at projectconsult@rightscale.com, and we're happy to engage in that initial discussion.
So I have a question here, Michael. What recommendations do you have for companies that need to maintain compliance with a variety of regulations? Can you still use the cloud service? Can you still use a cloud service such as Amazon Web Services? The answer is yes, and I think I'll explain it with some examples. Actually, before I get into the examples, let me point out that I understand that even some of these compliance requirements are adapting slowly to better account for the way the cloud works, so that you can still stick with the original objectives of the regulations themselves, even if the exact details change a little bit. I believe that's happening in PCI, for example. So an example of PCI compliance in the cloud, we have a customer that runs an e-commerce operation, and there's some specifics of the PCI regulation where it was just because of the letter of the law, not because of faithfully what you want to comply with, because of the letter of the law, it was impossible to comply with it exactly that way in the cloud. So what they did is the entire environment runs in the cloud, except they move one server off into their own data center where they store their credit card information. So they're still getting the benefits of the cloud. They just carved out a small little piece.
Yep.
I'll give another example, Michael, and then I'll ask you to look at the next question. In the case of HIPAA compliance, we have a customer that wanted to be able to, I'm trying to not get into specifics of what they do, to be able to do some batch processing of information related to that, and you're not allowed to. You've got to be very careful about information about health information about people. So what they did is they scrubbed their names out. They replaced identifiable names with serial numbers, therefore complying with the regulations, and they were still able to put the data in the cloud, batch process it as they wanted to without having to interfere with what that works. So there's all sorts of approaches, really.
Yes, that's great. Thanks, Yuri. And there's a related question here. What are the biggest security issues and how do you mitigate them? You know, rather than dive into that here in just a short minute or two while we're doing Q&A, I'd point listeners to the webinar library on our website. We have an entire webinar on security and compliance where we were joined by the security expert from Amazon Web Services and Bernard Golden, who runs a consulting company called Hyperstratus. There's a whole webinar on this subject. Please have a look at that, and then feel free to contact us with follow-on questions. And we actually have a whole collection of other webinars on interesting follow-on topics, so please visit us there. Also have the question here, are there standard APIs across clouds? Two answers. The bad news is no. It's far from a standardized API world out there. The good news is it doesn't matter, because if you use RightScale, you're not having to deal at that level. That's exactly one of the benefits that we provide around our cloud portability.
So I have the next question here, Michael, which is, do you have examples for grid computing, then parentheses, especially on financial risk? And let me describe an architecture again, or what a particular customer is doing. I think that's probably the best answer. So it actually doesn't matter whether you're looking at financial information in this regard, or bioinformatics, or click-throughs and click yields on ad networks. This particular customer keeps, let's just say, quite a few terabytes worth of data stored in Amazon's simple storage server S3. And they add about a terabyte a day, and they need to analyze on a continuing basis. So what they do is, using the automation that we provide, every morning at a particular time, they stand up 100 servers with 8 CPUs each. And they put a terabyte of data into each of those. It takes about half an hour, because it all happens simultaneously in parallel. But in about half an hour, you have 800 cores and 100 terabyte cluster of, if you're familiar with Hadoop, where you can run a MapReduce algorithm. So in summary, you can quickly stand up a rather massive grid environment, crunch through the data, put the results back in a server that will persist, and then terminate that big grid that you created just for the purposes of crunching through a big data set that you had. And the financial versus bioinformatics is actually the details of the algorithm itself, more than the provisioning orchestration, which is the part that we help handle and automate.
Excellent, excellent. So here are a couple of questions I'm going to group together, Yuri. They're sort of starter questions about getting started. The first one is, do you help with choosing machine images? Second one is, what kinds of tools are provided to set up a fresh image? And the third question is, can RightScale help me through tech support or consulting with configuring machines, OSs, databases, web servers, etc.? Well, the basic answer here is yes. We do have an entire system architecture built up around this concept of server templates that Yuri touched on briefly. And again, there are webinars that go into the detail there, or you can talk to one of our account managers to get a more in-depth explanation. But given that architecture, it's exactly a system and an environment that helps you build up these assets in terms of machine images, configurations, etc. We have a whole set of cloud-ready solutions across a whole number of components, ranging from programming languages, databases, etc., that you can start with or maybe use as is. And then we do have consulting services that can help you address more custom situations, all with an idea of getting, at the end of the day, an automated, replicatable version of your setup, so that you don't have to go through the manual tweaking or customizing of systems all the time. So again, I think the solution would be get in touch with us, and we'll help take you through the particular questions and use cases that you have, and let you know whether we think they're appropriate for the cloud and how to get started and up and running.
The next question is, does Amazon or RightScale have access to my scripts or user data? Short answer is no. Now, I don't have the authority to answer on behalf of Amazon, but I do know they have a lot of information on their website, so I would point you to that. On the RightScale side, you actually need to, the term we use is invite us. You need to invite us into your account for us to have access to it. We end up doing that sometimes in a consulting role, in a tech support role, but we are very sensitive to the security concerns and the privacy concern of our customers, and that is something that we pay a lot of attention to.
Great. Here's one more question, and I think we'll just take this last question. And for those of you who, because we like to try and be respectful of the 1-hour time frame that we publish, after this question, for those who have remaining questions, I think our Q&A staff will stay on the line and continue to answer chat-based questions as they come in. And then we do get back to every single question that's been asked with an answer So we will follow up with you there. The last question is, do you provide business intelligence tools on demand? For example, Vertica, Pentaho, Talend, etc. We'd reference, we do, and we'd actually refer you to our partner called Full 360, and I believe there's information on the website about that, who will help you get set up with a pre-built configuration that uses this deployment technology Yuri was showing. It's really a push-button, complete, multi-server, redundant, resilient business intelligence solution in the cloud at the click of a button. So it's pretty cool, and you can get the support you need from them both to purchase the solution and get ongoing help. That's called Full 360. So on that note, Betsy, you want to wrap up for us?
Yes. Well, thank you, Yuri and Michael, and thank you all for staying on. If you want to continue, there are 3 options here. If you're ready to get started and you just want to get your hands in, go get our free edition. It is not time capped, so you can just pull it down, start going on the cloud, and use that. If you need additional features, then you call us up and we move you into one of our paid editions at that point. But it is enough for you to get started, try it out, and if you're a single developer, it's probably enough for you to go for a while. If you have a project and you have some questions, we love answering the questions, and we find that that's just an investment in our market space today. So we've set up a specific email, projectconsult@rightscale.com. If you email in that you have a question, you can email your question. We can try to answer it via email, or if we feel like we need to get on the phone with you, we might ask for a phone number, and we'll get somebody on the phone with you to help you get going. And if you're not ready for those and you just want to find out a little more, we do have a white paper available that goes through quantifying some of the benefits of some typical use cases, as well as the benefits of using RightScale with an infrastructure as a service cloud provider. This webinar, as all of our webinars, has been recorded, and it will be up in the next 24 hours. But I would encourage you to just go to our webinar series. There's a wealth of information in there from us and from our partners. It is on our website, www.rightscale.com. Just go in the Information Center and look under the webinars, and there's a whole archive of hour-long webinars that you can take advantage of. And with that, we will sign out for today, and I'm sure you will be getting more invitations for these webinars in the future. Thank you for your time.